to our first speaker, Miss Deborah Davis from PushLiving.com.
Hello, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? Thank you so much for coming to this first event. When I first heard about it, Push Nation, and my company is called Push Living, I said I have to be there. So I'm really, really pleased to be here and that you invited me. I guess the reason why they asked me to be here today is because obviously I'm a person with a disability. I'm a woman and I'm a business owner. And apparently I have a life that some people might look at and say I've achieved some wonderful things. Having children, getting married, going to school, having a job, those kind of things. So that's really why I think they asked me to be here, but that's not what we're going to talk about today. What we're going to talk about today is not your typical inspiration speech. We're going to talk about something that all of us can relate to. And it's about loss and how you move from loss into acceptance and all the stages we go through during that process. And now when I talk about loss, I hope those of you in the audience today who are not disabled don't think that you can't be included. Because when I speak about loss, I'm also talking about loss of a child, loss of a job. It could be a divorce. It could be that you are no longer the person you were because of age. It could be anything. So really when we talk about loss and moving through the stages, we're talking about the journey that we all can relate to, that we all are going through. When we say more beautiful for having been broken, the concept isn't beautiful as in I am beautiful on the outside. We're talking about really what's on the inside, okay? So let's start. Okay, well the first stage of loss really is acceptance of loss. It's acceptance is the very first thing we have to go through, right? That we're broken but stronger. And really the best way to illustrate this story is a shogun from the 15th century. He's Japanese, and I don't know how to pronounce his name correctly, so don't hold me accountable to that. But it's Yashimoto Yakasaki. Okay, don't look that up. But basically, he was somebody who had been seeing these beautiful heirlooms that were passed down through the family through the centuries, and they were pottery. And when they broke, and they were no longer useful to anyone, right? Because you couldn't put water in it, you couldn't put food in it. And he thought it was a shame that they just had to be thrown away. So he said, no, we're not going to do that. So he went out to the local village and he talked to a craftsman. He says, can you fix this broken pottery? And the craftsman said, sure, let me try. And he took staples and stapled it together and gave it back to him. And it wasn't very functional and it wasn't very beautiful, was it, with staples, and all the water would go through. He said, no, that won't work. So he ventured out further into the village, into another village, and talked to another craftsman. He says, okay, how can you fix this pottery? And he says, well, let me try something. And this pottery craftsman said, I'm going to take resin, which is basically glue, right? And he put gold dust into the resin, and he put the pottery together. So really, the purpose of our speech, and I'm hoping this thing will work better, is that it's all about perspective. You can take something that's broken and put it back together, and it actually is more beautiful than it was before. Now, I don't know if you are familiar with this pottery, but it's something that you will see in museums now everywhere. No piece is the same. They're all very different. Has anybody ever seen this pottery before? No? Well, they're more popular in the Asian cultures. But every single piece is different, and every single piece is unique. And that's what makes it special. And it's the same thing when you talk about disability and the scars, the broken places that we all carry, right? No disability is the same. No loss is handled the same. We're all different. So it's seeing the scars as something that is a work of art. So we're each work of art in our own accord. Sometimes when you live in a different body, and we call it a disability, and like again, any type of loss, we feel that our lives are never going to be the same. That just because it's different, i.e. the pottery being broken, that it's no longer going to be as beautiful or as functional. But what we're finding, and I have found in my life, and I know a lot of the people here today have experienced the same thing, is our lives can actually be more full than they were before. We can actually have more abundance and more joy. And I hear this a lot from people who have a disability. They say, you know what? Ever since I became disabled, I became a different person. I see things differently now. My life has improved. I was on a road that wasn't so positive, and now I changed. My whole perspective has changed. But the first step into getting to that place where we feel our life is joyful and abundance is really to overcome shame. Shame of what happened to us, shame of us being different. And I know a lot of people experience that, right? We feel like we want to hide something that's different about ourselves. We don't want to go out in public anymore because we can no longer look the way we were. Or it could be we're afraid to see our friends because we're going through a divorce and all of them have these great marriages and now we no longer fit in. So it's shame and humiliation and embarrassment that's the very first step of accepting ourselves. I have a great story to tell you. My friend, I don't know, how many of you heard of Rachel Friedman, the paralyzed bride? Have you heard of her? Well, she's known as the paralyzed bride because she was at her bridesmaid's party and she was pushed into a pool by one of her bridesmaids, the week of her wedding. So Rachel became a C5-6 quadriplegic. And she modeled for one of my companies called Photo Ability. We have a stock image library for people with disabilities. And she was one of our first models. And when we were setting up the shoot for her, she called me in a panic. Deborah, I need you to really understand. It's so important that this photographer doesn't see that I wear a urinary device, or we all know as a leg bag. Whatever you do when I'm changing and there's not a changing room that's accessible, make sure that they don't know about this leg bag, make sure they never see it, and please make sure it's in none of the pictures. I said, don't worry, Rachel. I mean, I think I had 2 phone calls just about that. We put so much time and energy in trying to pretend like everything's the same as it was, right? And that, we are not weaker than everybody else. I remember when I used to have to transfer myself into my car, I would never let anybody watch me because I was weaker during that moment. Don't watch me transfer because I look funny. So that's the very first step, right? Is overcoming that. Well, the good news is about a year ago, Rachel did a Cosmo spread in lingerie, looking sexy. It's called What Makes Me Feel Sexy shoot. And she had proudly her leg bag just shown. Do you remember that? And that was really amazing. I remember thinking, wow, and in 1 year, how far she's come from shame and embarrassment to saying, you know what, that's just part of me, and that's okay. So really, the way that we get to that stage is understanding and changing our focus. So first we go through perspective, right? We can see the beauty in the places. Then we go through getting through shame and embarrassment. The next stage is really saying, what am I going to choose to focus on today? Am I going to choose to focus on the fact that I can no longer walk on the beach? Or am I going to focus on the fact that I can walk on the boardwalk, sit and have a drink and listen to the band, right? Are we going to choose to focus on the fact that I no longer have the huge house and I can have these giant parties and I'm no longer married, or whatever the loss that you feel may be? Or I'm going to realize the fact, hey, I can live the singles life downtown in a great condo and I can travel all over the world. There's 100 things that you can do to every one that you can't. So when you focus only on the things that you can't do, it causes depression, it causes us to go within ourselves, and it causes us to feel low self-esteem, right? When you're always focused on that. So you really have to start focusing on how to do things differently and how we can still shine even though we're different and even though things have changed for us so dramatically. But it's hard. And the reason why it's so hard, and I can tell you, it's not something that just happens overnight. Okay, now I accept myself, now I'm beautiful, and I feel so great about myself. No. It's not, it's a journey and it's constant. You have to constantly reaffirm. It's really more of a way of thinking. It's how we think, how our thoughts are. It's changing that, and it's like changing the channel every single day. From the negative, I can't do this, nobody likes me, no one wants to go out with me, this guy won't date me anymore, I don't have as much money as I used to. Changing the channel all the time. But society makes it difficult, right? Because they're constantly telling us what is beautiful and what is valuable. Youth, sex appeal, what is sexy. It's always about money, cars, men, what woman and what man is on your arm. So really we have to turn those channels off and start to focus on things that are more deeper, more spiritual. And it doesn't mean God, it could be God in your case, but it could just be focusing on the intellectual aspect of yourself and all the beauty that's around us that's not so superficial. But the answer to that really is you have to choose first to move on. So, and if you don't choose that, and it's not like everybody does, There's a lot of men that I've talked to in my lifetime who have been hurt by women and who no longer want to date. Women too, I never want to date a man again. I've been married and I don't want to ever touch that again. Or I am now hurt, I don't want to leave my house. Or I lost my money and I no longer want to move on. I don't feel like I can live anymore. You have to choose first to live. And that's something that I had to do, right, at a very young age. I don't know if anybody knows my story, but I was injured at 18. My life changed dramatically when I was 18. I was a dancer, I was working full time, I was traveling, I had all these plans that I was gonna do. And then one day when I was in Florida, my car broke down and it blew up. I lost my boyfriend and I lost my job. And I was crying one day in the pouring rain, and back then they had phone booths, so it kind of gives away my age a little bit. But I was crying in a phone booth and I called my mom. I was 18, I called my mom, okay? So when I called my mom, my stepfather said, okay, I'm gonna come down and get you. So he drove 13 hours from Maryland, because they had just moved up there to take a job, to pick me up. Drove me all the way back. I got a new job about 15 minutes away from where they were living. I just took a bus. I didn't even have a car. But I started living again, right? I picked myself up and started moving forward. But then at this great new job that I had, this man who was my general manager decided that he was going to start sexually harassing me. And this went on day after day after day. It made it so uncomfortable for me to go to work. I was 18 years old, right? You don't know what to do when you're 18 when that's happening. So what do? You go home and you tell your stepfather. You know, Dad, this guy is bugging me every day at work and I just can't take it anymore. So he gets on the phone, he calls the district manager, and he tells him, listen, this is unacceptable. And by the way, my stepfather was a US Marshal. So he was a tough guy. I'm not gonna let this happen to my daughter, you need to fix this. General manager said, yes, sir, we're gonna fix it. The very next day, I'm being transferred to about an hour away to Falls Church, Virginia. Back then, it was pre-Anita Hill, pre-sexual harassment, and what they did is they just moved the girl. Don't chastise the man, just move the girl. Well, that whole experience changed my life forever. I mean, that set me on a course that was so different than anything I was planning on doing. I was planning on going to college and Thursday to go see my dad, to talk about school. I was a professional dancer. My dance partner was up in DC. So we were supposed to be training all the time when I wasn't studying, right? Everything changed. Here's a picture of me and my beautiful mom at Rusk Institute in New York City. As you can see, I was very young and very unhappy. That's on the roof of Rusk Institute in New York. Is anybody familiar with Rusk Institute in New York? It's a great, great place. And there's a lot of great rehab places now. But back when I was young, they let you stay in these places for 6 months at a time. So I really had a chance to really live again. But again, a lot of people in my rehab said, you know, I don't want to move on, I'm depressed. I saw them in room after room after room, but that wasn't me. I chose to keep going, and I did. And I was actually a C6-7 quad at the time. So I had to relearn to use my hands, everything had to be started over again. And it took me 6 months, but I did it. And the very last day of Rusk, they have this test where you have to live in an apartment all by yourself, and you have to shower, you have to get into the bed by yourself, you have to cook a meal, and all the rehab people go, and it's really kind of fun. Well, I graduated from rehab and I moved on. I went to college. I got my first boyfriend about 2 weeks into college, and I just decided that I was going to continue to live. Okay, so that's really the story. You have to choose to do that. But even people who did not, because I don't want people to think here that you have to get your hands back in order to succeed. Obviously, that's not the case. I had many friends who maybe couldn't have graduated from that same apartment and couldn't have been living independent, that still went on to become successful mothers, models, husbands, fathers, etc. So it's really not dependent on your ability. It's really about choosing to live, choosing to go the next step. And these are all photos, by the way, from Photoability, which is the company that I own. So I'm going to give a little brag about that. How are you? But here's the problem. Let's say we go through all these steps. We accept ourselves, we turn our channel, we decide to live, we do everything right, we're going to be focused, we're going to be positive, and then everybody in society is uncomfortable with us everywhere we go, right? So you're newly injured, you're getting out there, and everywhere you go, people say, oh man, that sucks. Or, I'm sure, Jessica, you've heard this, right? I would never be able to live if that had happened to me. We hear that all the time. It's kind of depressing, right? So really we need to change that. We need to change the aversion that people have to people with disabilities. And that's again why I started my company. Disability is not commonplace. When you open magazines, you don't see it. When you turn on the commercials, you don't see it, right? A lot of times in the workplace, you don't see people with disabilities. You're not used to them. So if we make it more commonplace and everybody's just used to seeing it, everybody's going to be a lot more comfortable. Employers are going to be more likely to hire us. People are going to be more likely to date us. And we certainly are going to be more likely to go out in public because we're not going to be embarrassed all the time and be, frustrated by all the feedback that we constantly get from people. So that was the goal of Photability.net, is one of the companies I own as well as Push Living. We do stock images. So the concept being is that let's take people with disabilities and put them in marketing brochures. Let's take people with disabilities and put them in magazines. And that's really what we've been working really hard to do. It hasn't quite happened yet, but we're getting there. As a matter of fact, we have one of our models in the audience. And we're trying to sell those magazines. We're trying to sell those advertisers on it. It's been a really uphill battle. But if anybody here today, just if you want to, find us, like us, and share us. Share our beautiful photos. And all our models have disabilities. All of them are authentic. They're not fake models with disabilities, and they all get paid every time our photos sell. So it really helps with, being disabled is not cheap, right? I think most of us should know that. So the goal is a picture is worth 1,000 words. We believe that an image can change perception, and it's not just a perception of those of us here in the United States, because we've got the ADA since 1991. We're really getting there. We're talking about perception of people all around the world. If they start seeing people like us in magazines, on TV, and in movies, they're going to be like, wow, maybe we should make some changes where we are. Because if you live in India right now, there is no access. You can't get out of your house. So my mission is way bigger than just getting in magazines. And it's not about me and my models. It's bigger than that. It's global. We want people all around the world to see that people with disabilities are beautiful, they have something to offer, and that they should include them, okay? So that is often our reality, and the previous picture is how you're usually depicted, right? We're always depicted in this very sad way, in a very medically oriented way, versus me, and that's actually me out in the Everglades having a great time on an airboat. So I don't know if anybody wants to go airboat riding, but that's Cooperstown Airboats. They have an accessible airboat you can just roll right onto. Now, one of the things that we can do, and I have to warn you about, and everybody knows this, whether you're a woman and you're trying to get through the glass ceiling, or you're a person with a disability, or even if you're poor, having all these issues to get through makes us stronger, right? We're stronger, we're more resilient, just like that pottery. That pottery, now that it's broken and put back together with the glue, is stronger now. It's amazing, if you drop the same thing, it won't break. Now that it has the resin, it has a foundation of support. So when you go through loss, you do become stronger. And sometimes you have to really self-advocate because people will ignore you. I mean, I've been into, when I was doing sales, I would go into a place and they wouldn't even look at me. Like, are you even here? I'm like, hi, it's me. I came to talk to you about, buying some products. And they were like, oh, okay, like all uncomfortable and like not understanding what was going on. So you have to learn to be very persistent, right? And be very hard-headed. So I've learned that. I'm very hard-headed. I hope that those are the traits that my children now have. They learn from me by watching me have to fight my battles every single day, just to get access, just to get the job, just to get people to take me seriously and to respect me. So those are some of the gifts and things that are worth it. But there's also others. I was thinking about it when I was developing this speech. And I realized that having a disability or a really great loss actually gives us gifts. And some of them, and I call them the golden gifts, and with the theme of the pottery, right? There's 6 of them that I can think of, and maybe you can think of others that you can tell me later. The first one is increased empathy and compassion. I'm not talking about pity. I'm talking about real compassion. When you go through your darkest moments, when you are there, and when you're in a hospital bed and you have people taking care of you, and you're weak, and all of a sudden you have to show up again, you get compassion for other people. And this is a really great quote that I love. It says, compassion is not a relationship between the healer and the wounded. It's a relationship between equals, right? You're not looking up here, looking down at them. You understand because you've been there too. So that's a gift that we get, that we can now give the world, that makes us even more beautiful and more golden. So when I talk about beautiful, I mean that kind of beauty. Now, we're not, again, talking about pity. Pity versus empathy. Pity is something when you look at somebody with a disability, you say, you know what, their life must not be so good. I had that happen to me recently when I went to the eye doctor. I just went in because I had dry eyes, right? I'm getting older, dry eyes, you gotta go to the doctor. And I walked in, he goes, so what happened to you? And I figured, okay, he's a doctor, he wants to know what happened to me because he needs to know my medical background. That wasn't why he asked. As soon as I told him I had a car accident, he goes, how old were you? I said, 18. He says, oh, that sucks. A medical doctor, that sucks. And I feel like thinking, well, this is a problem, right? You're assuming that my life sucks. That's bad. Your life probably sucks more than my life. I said, trust me, I'm having a good life. But it's something that we have to battle all the time. It's not, I do it. And I'll give you an example. One day I was driving home from work and it was really, really hot. And there was a 4-lane highway and this guy, I stopped at the stoplight and this guy was walking. Of course he could walk, which is even more than I could. But he was walking very laboriously across the way and it was boiling hot sun and it was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Florida, Miami. And I actually felt bad for him. I had pity for him. And then I had to stop myself again. Like I said, it's a journey, you have to change your brain. And I'm like, wait a minute, Deborah, that guy's probably gonna get in a Mercedes-Benz. He's probably gonna go home to his house in, you know, this beautiful mansion with his beautiful wife and his gorgeous kids. And I just felt sorry for him. So it happens to us all the time. So I just implore you, when you meet somebody who's going through something, just remember not to feel pity. It's okay to have compassion. You might be going through something too, but don't pity us. And this is a sign, I'm not sure if it's going to show in the next one. Yeah, it is, good. Because pity actually disconnects us. And if you can see, I don't know if you can see on here, can you see the sign? Okay. One of the things is a really good illustration of this and how you can connect with people and understand is that imagine yourself and something that you personally have gone through in your life that's a tragedy. When you see people like me, you see the tragedy right away, right? Right when we walk in, you're like, oh, look what happened to her, something bad, right? I could have been born this way, I could have lived this way my whole life, but you see it. Most of us carry these scars inside. And when we carry these scars inside, they're hidden from everybody. Nobody sees them, right? But you know they're there. You might be having a day because of your scars, a bad day, but we don't know. When you see me having a bad day, you probably go, yeah, she's having a bad day because she's in a wheelchair. So imagine for a moment if you had to carry around your greatest tragedy, whatever it is, and every time you walked into a room or got on an elevator or were going on a date or just going to the bathroom, somebody saw that. And the first thing they did when they looked at you was like, oh, I'm sorry. That really sucks. I feel bad for you. If you have to overcome that every single time you meet someone, that's a burden, right? That's a heavy weight to carry. We want you to talk to us and say, oh, you're a mother too. Not like, oh, you're a mother? That's so great that you can have children and you're disabled. Wow. That's called inspiration porn, and we'll talk about that in a second. But hey, I'm a mother too, so we relate to people as human beings, you know, not based on what you see the first time. Inspiration porn, I'm sure most of you have heard that already. Who has heard that expression? Please raise your hand. You've heard it? You've heard it. Anybody else? Inspiration porn? Okay, it's a dirty word, but it's still important. The inspiration porn, really briefly, because we don't have a lot of time to talk about it, is when people are overly inspired. So you go from one level where you think my life sucks to the other level where you feel so inspired by me because I went shopping and you can't believe I did it by myself, right? Stella Young is a comedian in Australia. I implore you guys to look her up and see her YouTube video about inspiration porn. Just look it up and you'll find it's hilarious, and she'll do a much better job than I'm going to do. But basically, again, when you're overly inspired by someone because they have a disability, you're not relating to them as a human being. You're relating to them, again, about my disability. So when's the last time you saw somebody with a disability on Dr. Phil, or the doctors, or any news show that wasn't talking about the tragedy of their disability, or wasn't talking about the fact that they ran a marathon, or something inspirational, right? Why can't they just be the doctor on Dr. Phil? Why can't they be the girl who's getting married and not the paralyzed bride? Oh my God, she's getting married. Let's, literally they will just, it'll be on every single news cover because the girl who's paralyzed got married. And of course the guy's always a saint, right? You're such a good guy. You married that girl. So focus on the disability. Okay, the second one, the golden gift that we all have, is learning to accommodate ourselves. When you become disabled or you have a great loss, and they also call it the spoon theory, is that you only have 5 spoons in a day, right? And once you use up all those spoons, they're gone. So you have to accommodate yourself. If you only have so much energy in the morning, you use up all 5 of your spoons, you're not gonna be able to go out to that party at night. But it's okay. You accept that. I'm okay with not having to keep up with the Joneses, not having the big house, not being able to do everything all my friends can do. I love myself the way I am, and you just have to accept the fact that I can't do it. So learning to accommodate yourself is really a gift, okay? And it comes with acceptance. And again, self-acceptance is really understanding the fact that when I can't do those things, I don't feel bad about myself anymore. The fourth one is experiencing the kindness of strangers. Again, if you experience a tragedy, you probably have all experienced the kindness of strangers, right? That is a golden gift of being somebody who has experienced a loss or a disability. So many times when I've been out with my friends, actually Frank and I were out a year ago, and it was one of our first dates, right, Frank? And it was the first time we were away somewhere, okay? It was a little embarrassing story, but first time we went somewhere away. So we drove up to Orlando. He says, there's some really great jazz clubs out there. I'm gonna take you up there because I know how much you love jazz. And there's no jazz in Fort Lauderdale, not really, not a lot. So we went to this place, and I went to the bathroom, and I'm not the best transfer. So when I transfer onto the toilet seat, sometimes I'm a little shaky. Well, I had something called a Long Island iced tea. Anybody familiar with that? Yeah. So Frank says, you do know what a Long Island iced tea is, right? And I'm like, yes, I know what a Long Island iced tea is. I'm a big girl. I'm not like, don't be patronizing to me. So of course I got mad at him about something, and I had another one. So then I go to the bathroom, right? I said, okay, you stand outside the door. I'm gonna go inside, and you just wait for me in case something happens and I need you. Okay, no problem. But I'm gonna lock the door. So I go and I roll over and I get into the thing and I'm fine and I pee and I'm getting off, and as I'm getting off, I fall. Shoo. And not only do I just fall like I've fallen a million times before, but this time I fell like 3 feet, smacked the back of my head, because I don't have any, I don't have the ability to hold myself up because I'm actually a C6-7. And I smacked my head so hard I passed out on the floor, unconscious, right? So Frank is like screaming, like, oh my God, I heard something in there, what do I do? He has to crawl underneath the bathroom because of course I locked the door, right? So he has to crawl underneath the bathroom stall and pick me up, vomiting the whole next day, going to the hospital emergency room, major concussion, took me months and months and months to overcome. So depending on the kindness of strangers is something we understand very well. Every time we fall, somebody has to pick us up. Sometimes I've gotten stuck in my van in the heat, and my chair got stuck in the little thing that holds your chair in. I couldn't get it out. And you have to, somebody of humanity has to come and lend you a hand. And sometimes it can be children who do it. Oh, honey, did you lose something? And they pick it up for you. And you look at this beautiful eyes looking back at you, and it's just so touching, And unfortunately, sometimes being in a weaker position, you get to see that a lot more. And it is something that I consider to be a gift. The value of the weed eater. Anybody know Gina Shu, have read the articles on dating? We have pushliving.com, we have an online magazine. We have a whole series on women with disabilities dating. Gina was injured, and her husband at the time decided that he no longer wanted to be married and got himself a girlfriend. Well, Gina had to go back out and start dating again, and it was really hard because she said, my goodness, I mean, she's gorgeous, she's 25, she got law school, she's got the perfect, resume, right? But she says, I used to get 300 guys writing me and now I'm getting 20. And she was super depressed about it because she felt like nobody liked her anymore. And she couldn't get the same amount of guys anymore. And her mom, who she calls the Dalai Lama, for, Dalai Mama, and she said, Gina, your disability, your wheelchair is like a weed eater. You're gonna weed out all those superficial guys who are just in it for just sex, not that we can't have sex, because we can, obviously, but who are in it just for the superficial stuff, or who just want to have a pretty girl on their arm, or to feed their own egos. You're gonna get guys who really look beyond that to the next level of a human being, beyond your outside, and that's a good thing. And I have found that to be true too, because listen, I've been injured since I was 18, and I can honestly say the men that I have dated have been the most quality men, have been really, really decent human beings. So I consider myself lucky, because I don't have to compete with all the models in New York who get all the, the really wealthy guys who are like Donald Trump, who are super superficial, and they don't care about anything other than the way you look, right? That's not good, nobody wants that. And lastly, it's perspective and gratitude. I think, and I can tell you, I talk to people with disabilities all day long because I do modeling shoots, I do magazine articles, I interview people on my podcast. So I talk to a lot of disabled people. And I have found over and over and over and over again, the ones who chose to live, not the ones who didn't, not the ones who are still staying in their house and are depressed and are still focused on what they can't do, not those people, but people like Jessica, who the ones of us who are out here living. Gratitude is something that we have in abundance. Whereas the able-bodied folks who've been around, not so much. I've noticed that a lot, and it's annoying. It's like they complain a lot. It's too hot, right? There's too much traffic. Or why is that lady making me wait so long? It's constantly thinking about what they don't have. That lawn man, he just did a terrible job on the lawn, and I'm really frustrated. It's like, really? You're in perfect health, you have an amazing job, there's nothing wrong with you, your kids are healthy, and all you do is complain about what you don't have. You should hang around my people for a little while, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So perspective and gratitude is something that we have, and I think is a gift of having the disability. The final step to this whole little journey is rebuilding self-esteem. So let's take my first examples. You're a wife, your husband leaves you. You no longer have that lifestyle that you used to have, or you have a disability or a loss. You're a man, you lost your job, you lost your income, you no longer have that money you could just throw around like you used to. How do you rebuild your self-esteem? Well, it's kind of like a tree, right? Where you break off the tree branches, you grow other roots. You find other ways to find your value and what makes you you. You have to sometimes reach really, really deep and go grounding in to find that. But there are things that you can do that you can find that will make your life just as meaningful and just as beautiful as they were before. And actually, most people I know will tell you maybe even better. Once they've lost all the houses and the cars and all the need to be perfect and all this trying to keep up with the Joneses, they're actually happier, right? Sometimes you have to lose things, prune it away in order to rebuild. So basically, the bottom line of this story is today is that you have to ask yourself after a loss or a disability is, what excites me about life? What is my purpose now? Again, I was a dancer. It took me years. And it's not like something I just discovered and decided, oh, you know what? Now I'm great. My self-esteem is perfect. I'm over this disability. I've moved on. I've chosen to live. It's all great now. No. I mean, I've been living with this thing for over 30 years. And I struggle with it still. Every single day I have to do this. So again, it's a way of life and it's a way of thinking. Every single day you have to choose that. What am I going to do now? I'm still figuring it out. I mean, I have Push Living, which I love. I have Photo Ability, which is awesome. And I get to meet really amazing people at events like this. But I'm still trying to figure out who I am and what is my passion. Why am I here on this earth? I thought dancing was all it was. And now I have to rebuild those. And so you have to too. You have to find what it is that makes you feel passionate. If you want to learn more about me and what I do, and you want to be interviewed on my podcast, or you want to write an article for me in my magazine, or just to get to know me a little bit better and connect, you can find me at pushliving.com. We also do, like I said before, we do modeling. So if you want to be a model, some beautiful girls out here. Dana, I can't believe you haven't modeled for me yet. Dana, why haven't you modeled for me? I got my pointer. Dana. Yes, and yeah, I've actually written to you before to model, young man, so you're on my list. But if you also want to buy some of our images for your websites, and you don't want to use images that are inauthentic, come to me. I'm at booth number 8. Thank you very much. Thank you.